Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Velato. Tonight we're here to recap the final episode, the finale of Giants Hard Knocks. I think it was arguably the most boring episode, but there were a few interesting moments, and I think the most interesting part happened kind of behind the scenes. I'm going to give a shout out right now to Dougie Analytics, who we use a lot, but he presented the Giants draft board, or not the Giants draft board, but the overall NFL draft board, the order of how players are selected, and they're color-coded on the Giants draft board within the Giants draft room. And he decoded what those colors mean. So we're going to go over what those colors mean to the Giants and what some of the players who were drafted in this class fit into. We're going to go over all that and then everything you saw on the episode as well. So, Nick, where do you want to start here with this episode?
So we could start with that, but maybe we'll save that for the end because, the episode wasn't all that jam-packed. Not too many surprises, right? We figured that the Giants would be in the market for a cornerback. We talked about that months leading up to the NFL draft. And then after day one concluded, first name that we talked about on that podcast was who? Kool-Aid McKinstry. We're like, Kool-Aid McKinstry, the Alabama cornerback, he would fit in perfectly here. He was one of my top defenders in this draft class. He fell to pick 41, and then the next pick was Kamari Lassiter, the Georgia cornerback, who ended up going to the Houston Texans. McKinstry ended up going to the Saints for what that's worth. And the Giants were just like, okay, we can't get cornerback. Let's default and go with a safety since we lost Xavier McKinney. And it seemed like Shane Bowen's number one safety and a lot of people's number one safety. Shane Bowen seemed very excited to get Tyler Newman. And you can see why, because his eyes in college at Minnesota, it fits so well with what Shane Bowen runs, the two read coverages, the split field coverages. He's good in run support. He's a good leader. I think he's going to be a good pro. And Shane Bowen also mentioned that he could be a day one starter. And I think that's what's going to happen once he heals up that calf and gets back out on the football field.
Definitely want to talk day two, Nick, but I want to start with a few things that happened on day one that we learned. I think the first is, as we kind of learned last episode, Giants were really hoping the Chargers would take Joe Alt or J.C. Latham. Doesn't seem like either of those players were in the Giants' plans. They both celebrated the pick when Alt went to the Chargers and got their guy Neighbors. Now, that wasn't, without a little bit of drama. The Colts made a call to the Giants, and they offered Joe Shane 15th overall, 46 and next year's 2 to the Giants. And there was also another trade offer, which we didn't get a chance to hear on the show, and that was the Jets trade offer to the Giants to move up.
What was that? I'm so curious,
Well, I'm also curious who the Colts were trading up for. Aren't you a little curious about that? Like, I'm assuming, I guess it was Neighbors, but like,
that's what I think.
I guess for Richardson. I don't really think it was for a tackle, but I don't know. The Colts ultimately ended up taking Latu, the edge, so they obviously, went defense, but I don't think they would have taken him at 6. So it's very interesting. But let's start there, Nick. We don't know the Jets offer, but would you have preferred if the Giants had made the trade with the Colts? They got 15. They would have 15, 46. They would have then had 46 and 47, and then next year's second.
No, I think I'm okay with just selecting Neighbors because Neighbors has star potential. Joe Shane said in the last episode of Hard Knocks, if you can get your hands on a wide receiver at 20 years old under contract for cheap, you go ahead and you do that because he can be a difference maker for your offense. And we see the type of contracts that these wide receivers are getting right now on the open market. You don't want to pay that much money to bring in a guy like Tyreek Hill or bring in a player like that. Let's home grow somebody who is already an elite talent. So I would stay put and make the selection of Neighbors. I'm imagining you're in the same boat.
Definitely in the same boat. I think we've already seen a little bit of the flashes of this in training camp, just how explosive Malik Neighbors is. Giants often struggled a lot with him not on the field in the second day of padded practice. He is going to be a difference maker. And if they had moved all the way back to where the Colts were, that meant no Odunze and no Bowers. And those were the two guys I wanted if they weren't going to go Neighbors in this draft. I guess they could have got Brian Thomas Jr. or Xavier Worthy, two players I wouldn't have preferred. I know that would have meant they could have got another pick at 46, next year's 2. It's just not enough for me personally. If I'm moving back 6 to 15, I want a 1 involved. The Giants moved back from, I believe, 11 to 20. I think it was 11. It was either 10 or 11. I can't remember. And they got a first round pick for that when they traded back with the Bears. That was 9 spots. This would have been another 9 spots. And this would have been a higher pick. Like the 6th is worth more than the 10th. So you're trading that out for 2 2s. That doesn't seem like good value. I know some people said it was fine value. I personally don't love that value. So definitely happy with that. Jets, happy they didn't trade back with the Jets either. And I like what you said about what Shane mentioned with the reason we like taking a skill position player here is we're not going to get our chance to get this player. A, they don't hit the open market, the really good ones. B, yes, some you can get like AJ Brown or Tyreek Hill, but you got to trade for those dudes. Okay. You got to give up your first round pick and then give that crazy contract that you referred to. In this scenario, the Giants have Malik Neighbors cost controlled for, I will say, at least 2 years. The contract says at least 5, but to me, it's like 2, and then they could start complaining, and then they hold out, and then you give in and you give him the contract. Like, if he's as good as he could be, Neighbors, I think they're only going to have a couple years of that cost-controlled stuff. We'll see if I'm wrong about that, and they could hold off on that. Maybe it's 3 seasons if they're lucky.
Yeah.
I doubt he'll get into year 4 under that contract, but look, even just have it for a year or 2 is a major advantage.
Absolutely. And if you look, who were the Giants went with at 15? Would you go like Byron Murphy at that point? Would you go a defensive lineman to pair with Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence?
They very well might have.
It's interesting. I would have liked the New York Giants to invest in a wide receiver. It would have completely changed the entire draft for the New York Giants, obviously, right? I'm looking around at who's available, and is that too rich for someone like Brian Thomas? I'm not sure. It would have been interesting, but I'm glad they stayed put and got Malik.
I think there's a clear drop off between Malik and those players. So I am very glad about that. I'm a big blue chip guy. If you can get one of these rare blue chips, I don't really want to trade back. Ultimately, with the Giants draft a few years ago, when they did decide to trade back, I thought they missed on the guys. I thought it was Devontae Smith. They didn't like Micah Parsons for whatever reason, and they didn't want Rashawn Slater that year. We knew they weren't going to take an offensive lineman. It was like a thing that we had heard with Gettleman, just like, I'm getting a skill position player this year no matter what, which is obviously a horrible way to draft, but it was how they did it. So at that point, if they weren't going to invest in either the line, the edge, or the tackle, I was okay with them trading back. This is a different scenario, so I'm with you. But moving back to what you said about day 2, you made it clear at the beginning, and they made it clear in the show. The Giants had 2 players at the top of their board, Kool-Aid Minstry, the corner, who we both liked a lot, and McKinstry, and Kamari Lassiter, a player who I liked a lot from Georgia. I love that kind of player. He reminded me a little bit of Jalen Petrie out of Baylor, who I loved, who's been really good for the Texans. And on the show, Dable or Shane, I forgot who, said, we're confident this guy can play inside or out for us in reference to Lassiter. And I think he probably would have ultimately played slot personally if he joined the Giants. But those 2 guys went 5 and 2 picks ahead, or 5 and 4 picks ahead of the Giants, I believe. It's 41 and 40, whatever. Who cares? A few picks ahead of the Giants, but also, Nick, 2 picks after the pick they would have had, or a few picks after the pick they would have had if they didn't trade for Brian Burns. So just thought that was really interesting how that Burns trade really was like a butterfly effect, and it changed a lot for the Giants, because otherwise they would have had Kool-Aid on this roster right now and not Nubin.
Yeah, unless the Saints got creative and traded up knowing that the Giants wanted him. Something like that. And then the Giants would have went with another safety possibly in the draft. It would have been completely different.
So day 2, you first talked about something a little bit earlier, how the Giants were considering, we really like those 2 guys, Kool-Aid and Lassiter, but we can't afford to trade up. We only have 6 picks, and it would have cost them a 3rd, I believe, or their 4th, like you mentioned, was one of those 2. So ultimately they go with Nubin. And when they're breaking down Nubin, 2 things that stood out to me. One, they called him a blue player on that board. And we're going to get to a little bit later when we talk about this Doug Analytics thing, what a blue player means. But that was important for them. 2, I thought this was interesting. Joe Shane, and he's mentioned this before in previous episodes when he's talking about the running back position, Nick, but he discussed like how analytics played a role in this pick. And he's like, we did a study, and our study feels really strongly about the players who are able to come up with a lot of takeaways at the collegiate level. That translates really well at the safety position. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, takeaways are very important in football, and it's something that Tyler Nubin, I think he broke the record at Minnesota. So it's good that they're relying on analytics. Analytics came up a little bit later too with Theo Johnson's pick.
Yeah.
I think he said something like, "Oh yeah, our advanced analytics told us." Oh no, I'm sorry, Tyrone Tracy's. It was something like, our advanced analytics team told us that he was among some of the best college athletes in yards per touch. So we talked about that a lot on the podcast as well, but we'll get to him in a little bit.
Yeah, and it's cool to hear some of the stuff we talk about referenced by them. It's just interesting that that actually factors in. But, another thing on Nubin, I heard either I believe it was Joe Shane say, this is one of your conviction guys. I don't know if he was referring to, if he was talking to Bowen or he was talking about.
I think it was Bowen.
Yeah, so Shane Bowen had a conviction on this kid, and they got him. I'm sure that Bowen had a conviction on Kool-Aid and Lassiter as well. Just two players that the Giants didn't get a chance to get. Just a few picks before them. This is like the second time, I think, in Joe Shane's tenure that he's targeted and wanted corners on day 2, and they've gone just like a pick or two before the Giants. I think one time the Vikings traded ahead of them and took a player, and I think
they already traded back, though, at that point. They traded back.
It was the guy on the Titans, though, the short arm dude.
Oh, you're talking about that was
that McCreary, guy they really liked, McCreary, who I heard they really liked, and they traded up, or maybe they just took him earlier than the Giants. So it seems like they keep getting sniped on these corners. Though we get to the second pick in day 3 or day 2, and Joe Shane says, "Look, we view Drew Phillips the 3-down nickel," and I thought this was really interesting. He said he's the last corner that they feel fired up about before getting down to developmental guys. So they felt like there was a cutoff after Phillips to developmental guys. I love that, Nick, because I'm a big believer in what Joe Shane just said. When you get to day 3, every corner to me is a developmental guy. I think corner is one of the toughest positions to play in the NFL. I think there's a shit ton of busts. I'm not a huge fan of using too much draft capital to position because I think there's so many busts, even on day 2. And I like that he sees it the way I see it, where once you get into like day 3, these are just developmental guys that have a real chance to be nothing in the NFL and just wasted picks.
Or it's just they looked at everybody else on the board and said, this guy fits our system and we think we can rely on him.
Yeah, maybe just for his system, it was a developmental thing. I don't know. But I think
there was just a dearth of talent possibly at the cornerback position, according to them, according to what they're looking for.
Yeah, you look at the Giants' history, though, there's been a lot of day 2 picks at corner that just haven't done anything for the franchise. And I think that would be the case going across the board. I think corner's a weird position, man. I like taking the blue chippers like right away. Like if you have a Patrick Surtain, you take him. JC Horn, I know it hasn't worked out with the injuries, but like that was a guy I also really liked. That's where I want to go for my corners or free agency. But I was happy to see the Giants get a guy that they felt was like the last guy left for somebody who could play right away. And that was his theme. It felt like on day 2, man. Felt like they were trying to get guys who can play right away.
What did Andrew Phillips say? I believe when he was talking to Brian Daboll, they asked him, "Oh, what's like your number one trait?" He's like, "Oh, my toughness. I ain't scared of anybody out there." And that's what they're looking for, man. It's the second pillar of the 3 pillars of smart, tough, and dependable. And he's pretty dependable as well, especially in run support. He's going to improve the nickel defense if he earns that nickel job in run support. And I believe he has just, in terms of coverage upside in the slot, I don't know the last time we've had a nickel with this type of coverage upside.
Interesting.
Right? Like Darnay Holmes, Grant Haley. I don't believe they had it. Isaiah Simmons is now getting worked into that mix. It's just, will it be consistent enough? Because he is freaking quick out of his breaks. It's just, I think you need to be slow it down a little bit. And he actually talked about that when we were discussing with the media. He's like, just got to slow the game down a little bit. Yeah. It's going to come to me. Jerome Henderson's really helped me out with all this. So Nick McLeod, he mentioned, was really helping him out with all that. So once the game slows down for him, if he could just rely on his traits, he's got a lot of freaking traits. And he has the dog inside of him, and he has the toughness and the physicality in the run sport. He just needs to get a little bit better with the tackling as well. He could be an asset if he earns the job. It's just consistency, man. That's really what it all comes down to.
And he's getting some first team reps already as a slot and making plays. I saw him make a play, a PBU on a Wan'Dale Robinson out today. That was a really nice play by him on a throw, on a quick out.
It was a little bit behind, a little bit late, but yeah,
it was definitely behind and late. Though you're not allowed to say that, Nick. Be careful.
It's just subjective, man. It's
obviously it's subjective, but yes, the throw was behind and late. But even so, just the catch up speed was still pretty nice, and I liked how he played the receiver's hands. I always love when DBs are playing the receiver's hands. Like I think that's the best way to play the position at the catch point. So thought that was a good rep. But either way, another thing about Drew Phillips that you mentioned are about I'm sorry, you've mentioned something interesting about like the last time the Giants had upside at the nickel slot position. It's a very important position. A lot of the big plays. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Coverage upside,
right? A lot of the big plays in the NFL, and I've talked about this over the years, are slot fades now and are made on the slot. Like they put a lot of the NFL players are putting their best receivers in the slot on big money down, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase to make plays. And I was thinking the last time they had really good slot coverage was Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie when they had him in the mid 20 teens. That was really the end of it. And it was during the very back end was with Janoris Jenkins on the outside. And that was really a really good, sticky, loose corner to play that nickel position and match up against every slot. Hopefully Drew Phillips can be that next guy. And I think he at least has some upside.
There's upside there for sure. Again, he has all the traits to do it. It's just putting it all together. That's a different story. So there was one theme that I felt like was consistent and has been consistent with the New York Giants for quite a while, and that is the importance of the Senior Bowl. I think all 32 teams subscribe to this, but in this episode, that was a theme, right? Like they talked about Andrew Phillips, and what did Joe Shane say? It's like, oh, we really liked him down at the Senior Bowl. He had a great Senior Bowl. And then when they discussed Theo Johnson, that same sort of rhetoric came up, like, oh, we got to coach him a little bit at the Senior Bowl, or somebody that they knew coached him at the Senior Bowl said he was a straight dog. And I think Brandon Brown said something like, oh, when you get next to him and you actually see him in pads, then you really see how big he is. Me, Nick Filato, being at a couple practices now, I can attest to that. Theo Johnson is like really big, like uniquely big for a tight end. And I can't believe he tested as well as he did at his size. Like his hips and his lower body are massive. Like the dude has a gigantic torso as well. Like he is a mountainous type of tight end who can also block. So the Senior Bowl having high priority again for these late round 3 and then early day 3 picks.
I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to enter a parallel universe or go through some elaborate labyrinth just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. It's easy to switch to. The website has a good interface. I have a couple buddies who have recommended this to me. They speak highly of Mint Mobile. Get started. Go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That is 3 Bs. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. Plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. 3 Bs, triple B. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE system. If you haven't heard of the EE system yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE system technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE system.
Now let's get to day 3. Planet Theory boy, Theo Johnson. He is Planet Theory. I mean, that's what that's what you said when you saw him live. I'd like to see how he stacks up too. And that's what the Giants essentially said when it came to him. They're discussing how, like, look, this guy looks different when you get next to him. And they're like, that's why it was so important for us to actually see him. And they also said some things I thought were really interesting about Theo Johnson. They said he's a dog who never turned down a rep. His film breakdown with Dable, I love to see him break down tape with Dable. I thought that was really cool. And Brandon Brown kind of talked a lot about how much time they spent and just how explosive he is for his size. And again, he said what you said. Till you see it in person, you don't realize how big this dude is.
Exactly, man. And dude, remember some of the reps he had, the one at Indiana where there was a linebacker inside leverage against him and he was able to
love that rep.
Not pirouette, but he did like put both feet in ground and he spun off of it and undercut the leverage of the linebacker. That shows processing, that shows awareness, that shows understanding how to uncover yourself in tight coverage through the leverage. That defender was trying to prevent him from getting to the inside and he spun underneath it. You know how much control and balance you need to do that? And he's doing this at 6'6", 260 pounds. And then he extended way away from his frame and plucked the ball out of the air. It was all very impressive traits from Theo Johnson. I think the Giants got really lucky that he fell to the 4th round. He could have easily, with the Senior Bowl and the offseason that he had, the combine, been a day 2 pick, right? Probably in the 3rd round or something. We've seen lesser tight ends go in the 2nd round. Hopefully it can all come together because he wasn't all that productive at Penn State, but situations do dictate things of that nature.
I think if he played with Caleb or some of these other really explosive throws at the college level, Drake May, I think he would have been a 2nd round pick on it. And I do strongly believe that. I believe in the evaluation. I believe in the traits. We'll see if the Giants can get the most out of that. Does no guarantee that he's going to work then for the Giants because we are a team that needs to get better offensive line and quarterback play. And offensive line is true. It's just we also need better quarterback play. The whole passing game has to get better for players like him to really stand out. Or it's going to look a lot like what happened at Penn State with Theo Johnson, where he's not involved in the passing game. And the pass game is way off from a timing standpoint and just not good at all. At least that's how it looked on tape to me. But that was really interesting to me. I also thought it was interesting to hear before we get into the 2nd pick on the Tyrone Tracy pick, which we have some stuff to say. Did you catch the thing that Joe Shane said about Wellington Mara, where it was like, that was really cool, I thought.
Yeah.
It just showed the difference between like John Mara and Wellington Mara. Wellington Mara was one of the best owners in franchise in like sports history, essentially. And apparently he made the push for the Giants to take Justin Tuck when they weren't going to, according to Shane. And he said it was because he was the highest player on their board. And I feel like they were alluding to that with Theo Johnson at the time of the Theo pick. He was just the highest player on their board. They had to make that pick because of it. And it was just really interesting to hear that Wellington Mara, the reason the Giants had Justin Tuck at like one of their best value picks in draft history was because of Wellington Mara.
Wellington Mara knew his football, right? Goes back to like the 1920s, this guy, all right? He knows his football. He trusted his gut, and he got one of the best Giants over the last 20 years. The franchise, just by saying, it's top of the board. I don't care about team needs. You go with the damn best player, and you select him. And Joe Shane, I remember after the press conference of the entire NFL draft, on day 3, he was talking about, I don't think there was a day 3 pick that we made that wasn't the top player on the board. And a lot of people are like, yeah, it could be bullshit. But I don't know. Some of these comments from Hard Knocks, Musa, let's leave him aside. Definitely Theo Johnson and Andrew Phillips, it seems like that could be the case. Now, with Drew Phillips, he was the top corner. Was he the top guy? a little unclear at this point, but they really needed a cornerback. Theo Johnson, though, that's one player that I am sold on that they really did like, they really did appreciate, and they were really happy that he was still available there in the 4th round.
Yeah, I really like that pick. And then Tyrone Tracy, a pick that we also both liked. I kind of loved how Brandon Brown described that to us on the show. Like, everybody looked at his age and his inexperience as a running back as a negative. We flipped that on its head and we looked at it as a positive, almost in the sense that he's only available because of these supposed red flags. And to him, he was a player who said a bunch of things. Coaches rave about him. Our analytics department, which you mentioned earlier, talked about the explosive play per touch. But the one thing that stood out to me, Nick, in that evaluation was that he said he could play all 3 downs. I thought that was really interesting because here's the thing. We've kind of discussed him as maybe somebody who takes some touches this year, maybe somebody who's like a passing specialist for the Giants. But ultimately, his profile, man, like he's big enough to potentially play a lead back role. He's big enough to get a lot of touches at the NFL level. It's not like size is an issue for him. If he can do the things that the Giants believe he can, which is have more, show more experience in pass protection and show more of an understanding of what to do as a runner. Especially obviously under center, like he has very little under center reps. It's mostly shotgun in his tape. If all those things click fast from that mental standpoint, it's not like he doesn't have the size to be a big, like to take on a huge role in this offense. If not this year, next.
Exactly. Tyrone Tracy, he's 209 pounds, 5'11", 209 pounds. That's an NFL build for a running back. And he's chiseled up. He's yoked up, ready to go, baby. I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to the preseason game.
Then Musau, the last pick, they didn't really give us too much on, but they did tell us, and then we'll go over it in a minute, that he was a blue player for them on their board.
Oh, okay. And we will go over that in a little bit. And before we go over that, though, we saw Tommy Tavern's appearance, and we also saw a Don Bosco prep hoodie from Mr. Joe Shane. So, Dan, have you ever been to Tommy's Tavern?
I have been to Tommy's Tavern. I feel like that was but didn't you like that place? Didn't we go once or something like that?
Did we go once?
Maybe not.
I mean, I've been there before, and I mean, it's solid.
I get it mixed up sometimes with Miller's Ale House and Tommy's Tavern. I feel like they're like the same thing, but they're not.
They're very similar. I think they're the similar.
Like the same idea.
Come over here and enjoy some sports and some wings and some beer. It's not Hooters.
No, that place looked pretty cool. The one they went to looked pretty cool, by the way, with that fire pit. I thought that was legit. So
they definitely rented that shit out, bro.
Oh yeah, they definitely rent that shit. I was like, there's no way any of us commoners could have just been in there like for that.
I think that's the one on Route 3.
Probably. I feel like I've seen that one, but I guess we didn't know about that. But yeah, that was cool. And it was funny to see like the two wives of the GM and the coach like talking about like, oh, this is our pick. It's Tyrone Tracy. Like it's just funny to hear. Like they're following the draft. These guys are grinding their asses off for this one day. But to them, it's just like, oh, I just like seeing the videos of the players. And that was cool too, because I liked how they discussed how like they were the counterpart to each of their respective husbands. But let's get to the board here because I thought it was very interesting, Nick. So if you can present it, this is very interesting. This doesn't show up that well, but you can kind of see it if you're watching along. But let's go over it real quick because we'll talk about the players, so you may not need to see it. So according to Doug Analytics' research, if a player on the board is blue for the Giants, that means he's an all-around good leader, teammate, and person. If he's red, that means he has medical concerns. If he's purple, that means he has character concerns. If he's gray, that means he's a multi-position player for the Giants. They view he could play multiple positions. He was not able to find out what pink means, and we'll go over some of the players who landed in pink, and we can kind of make our guesses, Nick, which I think will be fun as to what pink means. And then yellow, another thing Doug was not certain of. There's only one player who was yellow on this entire board for the Giants, and this board is every pick in the actual draft. And so we'll go over our guess as to what we think that means. Let's start with the blue players. Out of the first players taken up to the 6th pick for the Giants, and remember, blue meant the Giants believe he's an all-around good leader, teammate, and person. They had Drake May, Marvin Harrison, Joe Alt as those players. They did not have a blue for Malik Neighbors. They had a blue for Rome Odunze. They had a blue for Brock Bowers, who we learned later the Giants would have drafted if they had traded down. And they did not have a blue for Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels. I thought that was interesting. They didn't have a red medical concern for Michael Penix. So I just threw a lot out there. And they didn't have a blue from J.J. McCarthy either, by the way. The only quarterback that they had a blue for was Drake May. So I just wanted to throw all that out and we'll start there, and then we'll get on some other players. Any thoughts on any of those?
It's interesting. It's with the Giants. I'm trying to figure out exactly what traits these guys have shown that the Giants are attracted to. But a lot of this is revealed during the meetings, and it's stuff that we can't necessarily see. Now, all the guys that you just mentioned, Rome Odunze, that was the easy one that we all understood. Yeah, he is going to be that blue chip guy. The Giants are going to absolutely love his character and his leadership. The other players, like we thought, like there was nothing to suggest that Drake May and Joe Alt were bad. Like I would say, yeah, Joe Alt probably is, but on the outside, it's just difficult to discern if they are or if they aren't. So it's cool to see what the Giants actually think of these specific players. And I'm not shocked to see some of these names pop up there, specifically Rome Odunze.
Yeah, a few more names just to go over, Nick, because I think it's interesting. Murphy, the defensive tackle who we like, the interior guy, was a blue. So if they had traded back to 15 with the Colts, they might have taken Murphy and put him next to Dexter Lawrence. And that would have been an insane interior combo, by the way. Can you imagine those two together on the Giants defensive line?
He's the exact player that Shane Bone was looking for.
Yeah, with Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau.
Like, it would have been so fun.
It would have been fun. I'd still rather Neighbors. It would have been fun. A.D. Mitchell, player we both liked, red. So they had medical concerns about him. Graham Barton was a blue guy. Loved him. Wiggins was a blue guy. Pearsall was a blue guy.
That's Kenyon Mitchell, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Kenyon Mitchell, not an A.D. Mitchell. And that's even more interesting. I thought you're right. A.D. Mitchell, a second-round pick. So Kenyon Mitchell, interesting. Another red flag or red injury concern was Ladd McConkey. Cooper DeJean is a player who we talked about liking, but he was red. But keep in mind this, Nick. Kool-Aid McKinstry, who they told us they liked on this show and made it obvious, was also red. So they were willing to draft him despite the red, which goes to show maybe he's an example of a guy they would draft. But then Lassiter, who went and picked later, who they also loved, was a blue guy.
There are obvious red players here who did have injury concerns, like Zach Zinter and like Jonathan Brooks. And I'm trying to think of what was Kenyon Mitchell's. I think he had something in the pre-draft, but I don't know if it was anything too glaring. And then I'm looking for A.D. Mitchell, and I don't see him highlighted in red. And we know he had medical concerns as well. Maybe were those guys not even on the board of the New York Giants? Maybe, and maybe that's like
no. This is the board of every pick. This is every.
I know, but like the guys, like they're not even red, even though we know they have medical issues because the Giants don't even have them on their board. They're not even going to be selected. But the guys who are blue, red, yellow, and they have these colors, they have specific designations, like they're injured or they're great leaders, but they're also on the New York Giants board. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think that could very well be the case. It's hard to know, obviously, but I think that's possible. I'm trying to find now, Nick, just looking a little closer as I go closer to my screen, who's in purple, because purple was the character concerns. I see
Nate Wiggins is in purple. Okay.
I see a bunch of pinks. I don't know.
Jermaine Burton's in purple, which is
that would make a lot of sense, by the way.
Javon Baker, it looks like the Patriots now wide receiver is in
some
purple.
Pinks I'm unsure of, by the way, and there's a lot of people in pink here. What do you think that means?
Pink, I am unsure. Now the yellow, I think I have a good beat on. I think the yellow
is just Joe Milton.
I believe I don't think he's the position that he's played.
Oh, okay.
That's what yellow is, in my opinion.
I was thinking it was priority UDFA, but that doesn't make sense because there'd be other guys there in the mix, though. But that is really interesting. It's just cool to see this. You guys can see it online. I retweeted it. Just see all the names who are drafted. Some guys are just white, which means they have nothing. But then a bunch of guys later in this draft are not blue chips, but blue players for the Giants. And then some red medical flags. And you can kind of see what players the Giants were and were not interested in.
Yeah, and then we see the players where the Giants selected, right? And they're all highlighted in red. We all know who they are already. And not by red, their names. I mean, the number of where they were picked. Jonathan Brooks one. Remember the rumor that was going around that the Giants wanted to trade up, or Carolina traded up to jump the New York Giants to 46? Ironically enough, the pick that the Giants would have got if they did that Colts deal would have been 46. I don't think they were going Jonathan Brooks, though, the entire time. I think they were dialed in on one of those corners or Tyler Nubin. Now, if Tyler Nubin, say, went at 45, 2 picks before the Giants, I'm curious as to what the Giants would have done at that point.
That's an interesting question. I'm trying to look at who was after Nubin. Nobody in blue.
Well, the name that I was thinking was Mike Sandersteele.
Mm-hmm. I liked him, but I don't know if the Giants did. Not to say they didn't or didn't. I just don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to know, but he seemed, I mean, he's not highlighted in blue here,
right?
But he seemed like, just judging by what a lot of people said around the Michigan program, that he would be one of those like blue, like leader type of players. Like a lot of people gravitated to him, lights up the room, that type of thing.
What color is Phillips in? Drew Phillips. I can't tell what that color is.
That's a gray. It looks like.
Okay, that's the gray, and we couldn't figure out what the gray is multi-position. That's what it is, because he could play inside or out, according to them, or they might believe that at least. So that's interesting. Giants got a few blues: Masao, Newbin, and it looks like, is that it for the blues for them? I'm trying to see where Theo Johnson was drafted. I can't find him on here. Oh, there he is. He was a white. So yeah, just very interesting draft. And to see this board is definitely interesting as well.
Yeah, I'm glad they showed it. Now, I'm not 100% certain if all those colors are correct, but it's fun to speculate.
Right. Yeah, it's just fun to do. All right, that's all we have. Giants Hard Knocks, that's a wrap. Overall, I really enjoyed the series, Nick. Again, I felt like some of the episodes were a little more fun than the others and more interesting than the others, but it was great to see this insight into the process of being a GM, but also from our own team. That made a big difference in the fun of it. So I enjoyed it. How about you?
I enjoyed it as well. I would say it's a little bit more revealing than I expected.
I agree.
There were certain parts that were a little bit cookie cutter, or just like, all right, why are we spending so much time on this? But they were going in and revealing some things, some free agents that they were interested in that they didn't really have to tell us about. They really dove into the Saquon Barkley situation and painted it in a certain light. And there's two sides to every story, but it's overall it's HBO just creating content for us in the off season. And as much as I enjoyed this, I'm freaking happy that football's here though too. Like, this is cool to like cover, but
the training camp is more fun.
Oh yeah, training camp, preseason, and then we're there, baby. Then we're into football season. We can grind the film, and it's going to be a ton of fun, like it is every year, bro.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon. Go Giants.